Today, we're talking about the new public square. From physical town halls to social media feeds, from kampung classrooms to AI-enhanced learning, the spaces where we learn and engage are evolving rapidly. And it makes me think of Odin, a god of wisdom. He sacrificed an eye to see deeper truths. Perhaps in this age of AI, we're all called to sacrifice convenience to gain insight into how we educate, inform, and participate. Let's meet our guests today. 3 voices walking different paths through Singapore's civic landscape.
I'm Jeremy, just a Singaporean citizen that tried to run for elections. Turns out it wasn't easy.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevryn. I was a candidate for the general election in 2015.
Hi, my name is Jaga. I'm actually a trade unionist looking into the welfare and interests of workers. Particularly, I focus on the freelancers landscape now and also the creative freelancers in terms of how we can better support them in terms of building a sustainable career. I also contested in the last general election.
Jaga, you've worked at the grassroots level where voices from the community play a crucial role. How do you see the role of grassroots engagement evolving as Singapore faces new challenges in the coming decade?
Thank you very much for that question. So one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is community building, and this started in 2008. I was one of the EduSave Award recipients, and that's how I was recruited in to be a grassroots volunteer. And at that point in time, I'm not very familiar with exactly what kind of things we will do, but we started off organizing events. And of course, the misconception that we normally have about People's Association or any residents committee is that we organize events. I came to realize that we are just not an events company, but we're actually doing an important work of building the community, bringing people together. And sometimes the benefits of us doing such things is actually not seen very obviously on the ground, partly because you're trying to build the 4 races, different religions, people of different backgrounds, walks of life to come together. But these are actually ways for us to bridge people of different communities together. Besides that, what I've actually seen is that over time, we are also helping to communicate some of the government policies and also implement some of the government policies. For example, during the COVID-19 crisis, where we actually mobilized the volunteers to go and distribute masks and distribute the necessary things at the grassroots level. This is also because people know us as fellow neighbors. They have the trust in us. So when we go down, we communicate some of the misconceptions they may have. It will actually help to build that confidence and trust among people. How do I see grassroots will move in the next 5, 10 years or even 20 years to come is that we will not just organize events, but we will organize initiatives. Initiatives which are cause-based that people are interested in. Then you bring people together to pursue their passion and purpose in those cause-based areas. The other area I also feel that grassroots will also evolve is that for any forms of crisis, right? Today we have seen COVID-19, but besides COVID-19, we need to expect that there will be any form of crisis that will actually affect us as a country or as a community. We will then need to build up the capabilities to actually support such crises so that we build that trust and confidence in people that the situation or the institutions are in place to support them.
I see. Thank you. That was very insightful. Jeremy, as an independent candidate, you've chosen a path outside the established political structures. What has driven you to take this unconventional route? And how do you see the role of independent voices in Singapore's future political landscape?
Yeah, I think maybe perhaps from the perspective of why one person would be interested in going independent is because if you have a large party and you have generally a large pool of volunteers to work with, that's more mouths to feed, more disagreements, that's more resources that you require. I'm not quite sure if Singaporeans actually benefit from more of such organizations, more of such fragmentation. I think what changes going forward is that people will actually want to take that step themselves, to take the initiative themselves and try to set up their very own campaign in the future, which I think would be a good thing. Because if we can imagine Singapore whereby there are multiple independent candidates and smaller parties, I think this is something where Singapore will really thrive and excel. Throughout the years, it's become more community-driven, it's become more, involved in everyday life. And I think that's a good thing because after all, people like myself and even Kevryn, our work is not done just in front of a camera over 9 days. Our work will be done over the span of time that between elections.
Thank you very much. Kevryn, as someone with experience in both politics and social initiatives, how do you see the balance between policy making and actual social impact? Are we doing enough to ensure that policies reflect the real needs of the people on the ground?
Thank you for the question. So I think Singapore has long prided itself, with the policy making, that it's pragmatic, evidence-based and future-oriented. So most of our policies right now are actually very heavily backed by data and often piloted before we implement it nationwide. So I feel that in this deliberate approach, it has allowed Singapore to avoid policy swings and a lot of stability in our governance. However, this approach is actually a consequence that policy making can sometimes feel like from the top down. So it's not relevant to the people on the ground, like all average Singaporeans. Our policy making decisions right now are heavily reliant on expert committees and civil service studies, rather than the life experience on the ground. So some of the examples are, mental health issue. We have increasingly more awareness of mental wealth campaigns and school-based initiatives right now. But the access to affordable mental health care and the deep stigma surrounding this issue still remains like a significant barrier to all Singaporeans. Another one would be, what everyone is talking about is the cost of living. So right now we have a lot of CDC vouchers, GST vouchers and subsidies to help alleviate these short-term pressures. However, they only stop short of addressing structural concerns and such as wage stagnation and also the rising wealth gap. So how are we going to tackle all these issues? And the other one is also what I championed for almost 10 years ago. It's the support for single parents. So the policy shift to extend these housing benefits to unmarried mothers only come in after years of, people on the ground like us and other candidates who are relatable to all these, then it is brought up and it has brought attention. So then the government are looking into all these and adapt to making policies to cover all these areas. So I feel like our governance model is great right now. We're doing more than well compared to other countries. But as our society becomes more complex and diverse, I think the test of effective policy making will no longer be just about efficiency and stability. It's about whether our policies can resonate deeply with the people that we are serving.
Thank you very much. Politics isn't just about winning votes. It's about shaping the future, creating spaces for all voices to be heard, and addressing the issues that matter most to people. Jaga, you interact with communities directly and often see how the system affects everyday lives. From your experience, what do you say are the key gaps in our current institutions that need to be addressed to better serve the people?
Yep. So institutions-wise, I'm a firm believer that I think Singapore has done quite well as a country in terms of that. But of course, no system is perfect. There's always room for improvement. As a political scientist, I will always be very careful about some of the policies, the intent. That's very important because that guides us in the principles of why we come up with a certain policy and how we intend to move forward in the next 5-10 years. I'll give you a good example is that many of them actually have a misconception about the stop at 2 policy. The stop at 2 was at a certain context And at that point in time, Singapore was not ready to have that resources available to actually serve the kind of population that we have. Today, we are in a different situation. So henceforth, you may actually say that we have made a wrong decision or it was not the best decision at that point in time. But having said that, we need to see the context of why certain policies are drafted at that point in time. And policies will evolve. It will not be stagnant. The reason why it will evolve is because the situation will change. And the situation changes is also not because of internal, but mostly it's also external, given that we are a free trade and open economy. So hence, you have actually seen how many of our economic policies, such as even CPF, or HDB, or transport, has evolved. And these are results of how we have actually worked out with, through the trust and building with people. Whether at the political aspect, we get feedback, but also at the grassroots level, we have opportunities to interact with people who will share with us the ground sentiments, simple things like bus frequencies. And that can actually be done at the grassroots level. You don't need to go out and ask a question in parliament for that kind of purposes. That's grassroots. But then when you go to parliament, you're actually asking more strategic, more policy level, high level kind of things that you're looking at. I think we have been more inclusive over the years, but we can be more inclusive. I think the challenge that Singapore is also facing today is that we have a more diverse population than before. The generations have evolved where in the past we were focused a lot on nationalism, right? So hence, and then after which the nationalism stage, we moved on to another stage where we're talking about nation building, and then we talk about basic necessities. Today, I think we have passed that stage. We are now looking for more things which are not necessarily material, as like what Kevryn has said. It could be immaterial, like about how can we support people on sustainable living, mental wellness. These could be cost-based, or it could be also of people's interest and passion. Then how do we, as a government, at the end of the day, give hope to fulfill those aspirations? And that's when I believe that we need to be able to have more voices heard. But importantly is to understand any policy intent, what is the context of it. And fundamentally, then the next question will be, how do you fund them? Because it's very easy to come out and say cost of living is high. I think this one, everyone on the street is clearly aware. And anyone can speak for it, cost of living. Then what are the solutions? And if you come out with any solutions, how are we then going to fund it? Who's going to fund it? That is important.
Thank you. Jeremy, as a businessman and independent politician, you bring a unique perspective. You've been an advocate for incorporating emerging technologies like Bitcoin into policy. What role do you see cryptocurrencies and blockchain playing in Singapore's future economic landscape?
I think it's very simple that Singapore wants to retain its status as a financial hub. And blockchain technology is the underpinning, is the foundation material for a financial hub into the next century. This is something that cannot be avoided, right? There will be no longer a world where institutional payments take, only weekdays, right? You'll have a world where everything is 24/7, and that world will come sooner than later, and it's better to be prepared in that direction. So that's why blockchain will help us cement our status as a financial hub. And you talk about Bitcoin, right? And answering to what Jake said, which is, who will fund this? There are many more diverse causes, like Kevryn said, right? Who will fund this, and how will the cost of living be, alleviated? I think we have reached a sufficient point in our history whereby the owners of capital and the owners of freehold land are making a distinctive gap between themselves and the new younger generation workers and the youth unemployed who are struggling to find jobs. And I think the next 50 years will involve heavily our reconsideration of how much role capital is relative to the role labor plays. And I think that's very important for society. We're seeing record number of people be unable to find jobs. We are seeing forced liquidations. We're also seeing F&B shutdowns. So it has come to a point whereby if you are born today, and if you're born to a average to lower average income family, your ability to scale that social ladder is not the same as in the 70s or 80s. And the reasoning is very simple. Education used to be that ladder, but now with AI, education does not seem to give you an advantage. So capital needs to assist labor in having a better life. It could be with the unions, it could be to address our outlook on how techno-feudalism might leave more people behind. And we may also have to consider that we want a smaller and tighter population. So the stop at 2 might have actually worked in our favor, which I think luckily we did it well, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. Institutions are constantly changing, just as our needs and values evolve. They don't need to be static. They need to be responsive. Let's consider how Singapore's systems can transform to meet the needs of a rapidly changing world. Jaga, you've worked closely with communities in both political and non-political spaces. How do you see new media platforms impacting the way people organize and mobilize today? Is the younger generation more or less engaged with politics than before?
So when you talk about new media platforms, I think there are quite a number today. When it first started, I think you have Friendster. That was what I could remember during my time. I think now I'm not too sure whether it still exists, but many of them are now on Facebook. Today, we also have a certain group of people, the younger ones, generally on IG, TikTok, and as well as those professionals who are on LinkedIn as well. And these are just a few that I'm naming up. But what I can say is it's not about the platform, but it's the message that you want to bring across to people. And actually, each platform has a different algorithm, I think, which all of us are trying to understand. And by the time we understand, it can actually change over time. For me, I believe that, having many platforms is one thing, but you need to build a personality that people can resonate with you. And then after which, the content that you put forward must be something that people can resonate with. So if you are able to actually write a very nice, long-winded essays in a Facebook, I'm not too sure whether people would be interested in that. Unless that's actually a topic that people are really very passionate about. It's something that's very hot today. Maybe it will get some traction. But in a normal circumstances, that is not going to, because that's not the intent of Facebook to have that kind of long, it's not a blog where you write long essays. So it really depends on the mode of each platform. But importantly, what needs to be very consistent is that message that you want to bring across. So today, I think TikTok is getting a lot of attraction. It's because it's fast and quick, and people are able to have both visuals and also be able to listen. And there is also some text as well. So hence, this, we do not know whether it will remain, because there could be another platform that can come in later. But I think the important part is, again, go back to the message that you want to bring across.
I see. Jeremy, you've built a career in entrepreneurship, and now you're venturing into politics. How do you use your digital presence to engage with voters and influence public opinion?
Yeah, I think also with a successful businesswoman like Kevryn, I think sometimes it's more of using your voter base and using your digital presence to inform people of the regime that they are in. When I brought up Bitcoin in my political journey, it was not for the purposes of telling them that they should invest in anything like a Bitcoin or whatnot. It is more about the purpose that we need to know how land and capital plays a role in our society, and that we cannot overstretch this role. We cannot take a position whereby we believe land will always keep going up in price in Singapore without making adjustments. So we use, I use this particular vantage point in order to achieve the discussion on how does the HDB work, how does the CPF work, what is the role of the reserves, and what exactly are in the reserves. And going in this direction enabled more people to come up and say, hey, I'm not sure if my child will ever be able to afford a freehold land that I used to be able to buy. And that's a very important thing, because if your asset compounds faster than the next generation, and this next generation can never use education to acquire such freehold land, then we as a society need to ask ourselves, what kind of foundation are we laying out for the future generation? And that's pretty much the way I delivered the message. Yeah.
I see. Kevryn, many traditional political parties still see digital platforms as secondary. Do you think that is changing? And how important is the online space for political strategy today?
Okay, so like for decades, right, Singapore's politics was fought on the ground, primarily, such as door-to-door visits, hawker centres, outreach, and meet the PPO sessions, and also like coffee shop conversations. But the reality is that now the political background has shifted. Today, the online space is not secondary anymore. Many traditional political parties, both the ruling and opposition today, have already treated digital platforms as an add-on, like a value add to their campaigns. A way to broadcast press release and even having live streaming their rallies. So digital politics is now no longer about broadcasting, it's about engagement. Even Singaporeans overseas who are not able to participate in our elections on the ground during the campaign period are also now able to participate and voice out their voices through the online platforms. And this is where narratives are contested, where misinformation spreads as well. And younger voters can form their political impressions. Ignoring or utilizing this space is no longer an option for us anymore. And it will definitely not be an option anymore in the future elections, I believe. We are also beginning to see this change because younger candidates and younger parties are now experimenting, with Instagram Reels and like what Jaga was saying, like TikToks, is now very trending in Singapore because nowadays our young generations, their attention span is very short. So with TikTok, it makes it worse actually. And to capture this group of voters, I think both, ruling and opposition parties definitely need to tap on the digital platform during their future campaigning and also reaching out to younger voters. Some are actually also using podcasts and, videos to bypass the traditional media, because for traditional media, it takes time to reach to your target audience. Even like, for example, the newspaper or on television, like it's more costly also to buy ads on the TV than, buying ads online right now. So I feel like if the political institutions continue to treat digital engagement as secondary, they will risk irrelevance among the young voters especially. And worse is they probably leave space for misinformation and populist narratives or fringe movements to dominate the conversations unchecked. And in the long run, this is going to undermine trust not only in individual parties, but also in our political system as a whole. Yeah, so I feel like now online space is no longer the future of politics. It's actually present. Yeah.
I see. The platforms we use to communicate might change, but the underlying need for participation, for voices to be heard, remains the same. In this new world, how do we meet people where they are and ensure we're listening? I'd love to hear from each of you. Can you think of a moment where you felt powerful or witnessed someone shift the dynamics of power in a surprising way? What defines power in your eyes? Each of you.
Okay, maybe I'll go first. I think maybe it's not a person, but the technology of AI, it's impressive to me. And I think the role that Jaga plays is very important. And I'll explain why. By the next election, you will have entirely synthetic podcasts where each of the guests are created by AI and they are managed by humans. So it'll be increasingly hard to see what is the actual content that is real by the next election, right? And I think that would be good and bad. what is good is that people will be able to voice out without having to sacrifice their individual personal capacity in their life. But what is dangerous is that you can have very polarizing AI agents and videos, and they can represent voices that can no longer be contained. And so if you look at how we as a society take a view on that power, which we have to start planning around that kind of power that is uncontrollable. It's deeply rooted into the wild internet. And that to me is something that I see as power, because it gives voices and ideas a lot of ability to influence and control, but we don't know where that control is being dispersed.
So I wouldn't want to mention as like powerful per se as like a very big example, but even small examples can be very powerful because it makes impact to people's lives. Earlier I shared about an example of like past frequencies. These are examples where people actually feel that maybe after a certain development they could feel on the ground that the frequency of the past is not as good as before. And these are feedback from the ground themselves. And as volunteers, when they feedback, we work with the agencies to see whether the buses are running at acceptable service levels. And if so, then the question is then what do we do to improve the headway? Whether we add in a bus or is it a traffic condition that we need to do? These are examples where people will feel that they can directly impact their life because daily, every day, you're taking the bus to go to work or to go to the markets and so forth. Yeah, so that's one example that I can resonate with.
If on a personal level, I feel powerful, I think will be general election 2015, where I champion for single parents or single mothers. This area has never been highlighted before in Singapore's history because, all candidates, especially in the ruling party, they are all being showed as, pretty perfect candidates, right? And all of them are like scholars, etc. And even in the opposition parties, I think we never had a candidate with such a background. So I felt really powerful when this topic was being brought up, despite the social stigma and stereotypes in our society. And I believe after the election, the parliament passed the bill, to change some of the policies to help single mothers in this aspect. So to me, this is something really powerful, even though, I'm not in parliament, but at least I made a voice and it has been heard. Yeah.
I see. Power isn't something we hold on to lightly. It's something we can share, something that grows when we listen to others. The true test of power isn't in domination, but in the ability to empower those around us. Let's end where we begin. What does true, meaningful participation look like in Singapore? Not just in theory, but in action. All of you can answer.
Perhaps I take on this one first. So you talked a bit about power, right? So I see power as a means to an end. And what end are we trying to achieve is that we want to improve lives. I think regardless whether is it in the form of the ruling party or even individuals or opposition, I think all of us have the same objective. We want to have change because we want to improve lives. Then the question then fundamentally is that how do we go about doing it and doing it in a way that is actually sustainable for generations. And I also touched on about funding, right? That also covers a bit about sustainable as well. So I believe that when we come out with like any changes that's evolving. So today, one of the things that I think Jeremy also highlighted, right, that there's anxiety about jobs. So in my profession, one of the things that we are looking at is how do we ensure that our workers continue to be relevant. That means their skill set continue to be relevant so that they can be employed. And this is not people who are entering the workforce, but people who are already in the workforce. Of course, there's another group, which is our youths who are actually joining the workforce. How do they, after graduation, do they have actually stable employment so that then they can fulfill their other aspirations in life? So it is important that you put in the relevant policies, programs, everything in place to ensure to give them that hope and aspirations. But there will be gaps. There will be people who may fall within the cracks, and then you need to then pay some special attention to those. And if you see a significant of them, then that means that it's time for a review of a policy. So if it's a one or two, then it's actually isolation. But if it's quite a number, if you're seeing a trend, then I think we need to pay more attention to it. I give an example would be the group that I take care of, the creative freelancers. AI is not just affecting any other worker, but also the creative industry as well. Then how do the creative freelancers embrace AI in a way that it doesn't affect intellectual property, copyrights, and they're comfortable doing it, and they can also have a job for themselves, and they can be relevant, they can continue their passion in the sector. And that is something that we need to work with them, ask them on what are the areas, the gaps, the skills that they require, and then we provide them the relevant support.
For me, I feel like true power is not about holding authority. Just for example, in our election, it's not because the PAP has the majority vote, so it means like they're in power. Being power to me is being able to inspire belief and shift mindsets, and also open new pathway for actions. Is simply just like refusing to accept this is just gonna be how it is. Maybe for like past generations, it is like this. This is their mindset and the mentality that they have. But now with the new technologies, with social media and younger voters more involved in politics, they are already not accepting. This is just how it's going to be.
This is Kopi Table, where we slow down, pour a cup,